Have you ever felt like your real life hasn't actually started yet? Not because you don't have dreams, not because you aren't capable, but because somehow you're always waiting for the right time, the right opportunity, the right motivation, the right version of yourself. So you keep preparing, keep planning, keep imagining, convinced that one day everything will finally fall into place. But then, weeks become months, months become years, and without even noticing, your life begins to feel like something you're constantly getting ready for, instead of something you're actually living. If that feeling sounds familiar, you're not alone, and it may have far less to do with laziness than you've been led to believe. Welcome to Wonder Thread Labs, where psychology, neuroscience, and storytelling come together to help you better understand yourself. If you're curious about why we think, feel, and sometimes stay stuck, consider subscribing. Every week, we explore another hidden thread of the human mind. And if, at any point during this video, something reminds you of your own experience, share it in the comments. Your story might be exactly what someone else needs to hear today. Now, let's follow the thread. It's 8:47 on a Saturday morning. David opens his eyes, not because he feels rested, but because he has nowhere he absolutely needs to be. His apartment is quiet. Sunlight slips through the curtains. For a brief moment, today feels full of possibility. Maybe today's the day he'll finally start the business idea that's been sitting in his notebook for over a year. The day he'll update his resume, call his parents, clean the apartment, go to the gym, take the first real step toward the life he's been imagining. He makes coffee, opens his laptop, stares at the screen. His fingers hover above the keyboard. Then a single thought quietly appears. I should organize everything first. That seems reasonable. So he opens another productivity video, then another article, then another podcast. He tells himself he's learning, preparing, getting ready. Hours pass without him noticing. Outside, the city keeps moving. People are meeting friends, building careers, starting families, making mistakes, learning from them, living. Meanwhile, David is still preparing to begin. By late afternoon, the coffee has gone cold. His notebook is still open. The cursor still blinks on an empty page. And strangely, this doesn't even feel unusual anymore, because this isn't just how today went. It's how months have gone, maybe even years. If you've ever looked back and wondered where the time disappeared, you might think the problem is motivation or discipline or laziness. But what if none of those are the real reason? What if your mind has been protecting something you didn't even realize needed protection? Take another look at David. From the outside, his life doesn't seem unusual. He isn't reckless. He isn't irresponsible. He isn't avoiding life because he doesn't care. If anything, he cares too much. Every decision feels important. Every opportunity feels like it has to be the right one. Every beginning feels permanent. So instead of choosing, he keeps searching. Instead of building, he keeps imagining. Instead of risking disappointment, he protects possibility. Psychologists have observed this pattern for generations, not as a lack of intelligence, not as laziness, but as a quiet psychological conflict. Carl Jung described a pattern he called puer aeternus, often translated as the eternal boy. Despite the name, it has very little to do with age. A person can be 20, 40, or even 70, and still feel trapped inside the same invisible struggle. At its heart, the eternal boy isn't someone who refuses to grow up. It's someone who quietly fears what growing up might take away: responsibility, freedom, possibility, the fantasy of becoming someone extraordinary. Because the moment we fully commit to one path, every other path quietly disappears. And for some people, that feels less like freedom and more like loss. So the mind creates a compromise. Stay in preparation, stay in potential, stay in tomorrow. Because a dream that never meets reality can never be proven impossible. For a while, that protection feels comforting, but eventually, it begins to cost something far greater. Not success, not money, but time. And time is the one thing we never realize we're spending until we look back. Most people assume this pattern begins in adulthood. It doesn't. For many people, it starts much earlier. Long before careers, long before relationships, long before anyone ever expected them to have everything figured out. Imagine a child who learns quickly, who finishes assignments before everyone else, who hears the same words again and again. You're so smart. You're gifted. You're going to do amazing things. At first, those words feel encouraging. They become part of the child's identity. Not because they're arrogant, but because they're learning who they are. Over time, something subtle begins to happen. Success stops feeling like something you create. It becomes something you're expected to protect. Every mistake feels a little more dangerous. Every failure feels a little more personal. Because failure no longer says, "I need more practice." It quietly whispers, "Maybe I'm not who everyone believed I was." And for a young mind, that's a terrifying possibility. So without realizing it, many people develop a simple strategy. Don't risk the test. Don't finish the project. Don't launch the idea. Because as long as your potential remains untouched, your identity remains untouched too. For a while, that strategy works. It protects confidence. It protects hope. It protects the image of who you might become. But eventually, the same shield becomes the cage. Chapter 4. 3 ways the cage quietly controls your life. The cage rarely announces itself. It doesn't tell you to give up. It doesn't ask you to stop dreaming. Instead, it whispers, "Not yet." David never believed he was avoiding his life. He believed he was preparing for it, preparing to become healthier, preparing to change careers, preparing to build something meaningful, preparing to become the person he always imagined he could be. There was always one more book to read, one more course to finish, one more plan to improve, one more Monday. It felt responsible. It felt intelligent. It even felt productive. But little by little, preparation became a place he never left. The first sign of the cage is not failure, it's hesitation. One morning, David discovered a job opening. It wasn't perfect, but it excited him. For just a moment, he could see another version of his future, a different office, different people, a different life. He opened his resume, then he closed it again. Maybe it wasn't strong enough. Maybe he needed one more certification, maybe after another few months. By the end of the day, he hadn't applied. Nothing terrible happened. Life simply continued. And that's exactly why the cage is so difficult to notice. Because nothing dramatic happens. One opportunity quietly disappears, then another, until one day you can no longer remember what you were waiting for. The second sign is keeping every door open. David loved possibilities. As long as he hadn't chosen one path, every future still belonged to him. He could still imagine starting a business, moving somewhere new, writing a book, traveling the world, changing everything. Choosing one dream meant letting go of 100 others, and somehow, Losing imaginary futures felt more painful than never living any of them. So he stayed exactly where he was, not because he lacked ambition, because possibility felt safer than commitment. The third sign is the one almost nobody notices. Preparation can become an identity. David bought notebooks, organized folders, watched tutorials, created plans, refined plans, then refined them again. Every evening he felt exhausted, but strangely, very little had actually changed. Preparation gave him something dangerous, the feeling of progress, without the discomfort of action, because action can fail, preparation cannot. Then, one evening, David stood alone in his apartment. The running shoes still looked brand new. The notebook still smelled like fresh paper. The camera still rested inside its box. Nothing in the room was broken. Nothing was missing. Everything was waiting, just like him. For the first time, David stopped asking, "Why can't I become the person I want to be?" Instead, he asked something much quieter. "What am I protecting?" The room remained silent, but something inside him answered. Maybe he wasn't protecting his future. Maybe he was protecting the image of who he hoped he could become. Because as long as he never truly began, that image could never be proven wrong. And perhaps that is the most invisible prison of all. Not failing, but never allowing reality to meet your potential. The cage had never locked David inside. It had only convinced him that waiting was safer than living. And once you see that, you can never quite unsee it.
Yeah.
Yourself.
The first imperfect step. The next morning, nothing looked different. The city woke up exactly as it always had. Cars filled the streets. Coffee shops opened their doors. People hurried to places that mattered to them. The world had moved on, whether David changed or not. His apartment was exactly the same. The running shoes were still there. The notebook was still blank. The camera still rested on the shelf. For a moment, everything invited him to repeat yesterday, to think a little longer, to prepare a little more, to wait just a little while. Because waiting had become familiar, and familiar feels safe. David stood quietly, not trying to feel motivated, not waiting for confidence, not searching for certainty. He remembered something he had never noticed before. Every meaningful moment in his life had begun before he felt ready. His first day at school, his first interview, his first time driving, his first conversation with someone he cared about. None of them had started with confidence. They had started with uncertainty. Maybe confidence had never come first. Maybe confidence was simply the reward for surviving uncertainty. David looked at the running shoes again. For years, he believed becoming healthy meant becoming the kind of person who loved running. But perhaps it began with someone who didn't. Someone who simply put on the shoes anyway. He knelt down, slowly tied the laces, then stopped. His heart was beating faster than it should have. Not because of exercise, because this tiny decision suddenly felt real. The old voice returned. What if this changes nothing? For the first time, David didn't argue with it. He didn't try to silence it. He simply nodded. Maybe it wouldn't. Then he opened the front door. The hallway looked completely ordinary. No music, no miracle, no dramatic revelation. Just another Tuesday morning. David smiled to himself. Perhaps that was the point. Life rarely announces the moments that change it forever. It disguises them as ordinary days, ordinary decisions, ordinary steps. He walked downstairs, crossed the quiet street, reached the park. He didn't run. Not yet. He simply stood there, listening. Birds, wind moving through the trees, distant conversations, his own breathing. For the first time in a long time. He wasn't imagining a different future. He was standing inside the present. After a few seconds, He took one step, then another, small, awkward, unremarkable. No one applauded. No one noticed. The world didn't change. But something inside David did. Because every prison has a door, the hardest part is believing it was never locked. Perhaps the life you've been waiting for has never been waiting somewhere ahead. Perhaps it has been quietly waiting on the other side of one imperfect step. The bigger truth. Perhaps David was never unusual. Perhaps he was simply human. Most of us spend years waiting for the perfect moment, the perfect plan, the perfect version of ourselves. But life has never asked for perfection. It only asks whether we are willing to begin. The greatest tragedy isn't failure. It's spending your entire life rehearsing without ever stepping onto the stage. Fear will probably never disappear. Doubt may always walk beside you, but neither of them gets to decide the direction of your life. Only you do. The life you've been imagining hasn't been waiting at the finish line. It has been quietly growing inside every imperfect step you were afraid to take. Maybe there is something in your life you've been postponing, a conversation, a dream, a business, a letter, a phone call, or perhaps just one small step you've convinced yourself you're not ready for. You don't have to change your life today. You don't have to become fearless. You don't even have to know where the road leads. You only have to stop waiting for permission, because someday you'll look back and you'll realize the day your life truly began didn't look extraordinary at all. It looked like an ordinary morning when you finally decided to begin. If this story felt strangely familiar, perhaps someone you care about is still waiting for their life to begin. Share this story with them. And remember, follow the thread. Discover the extraordinary.